everyone. In today's episode, we're diving into the topic of happiness in careers, something we all strive for, but sometimes we struggle to maintain. And joining us today is someone who has dedicated her life in helping others find joy, Teresa Greco. Teresa is a certified happiness life coach, currently pursuing her PhD with a dissertation focused on inner happiness. She's a multiple times TEDx speaker, a 4 times best-selling author, and an international writer and editor for a leading Canadian lifestyle magazine. She hosts 2 amazing shows, the Steps to Happiness show with Teresa Greco and the Happy Hour with Teresa Greco. Plus, she's the founder of Steps to Happiness Coaching, where she helps individuals and organizations tap into more happiness, love, and peace. So if you're ready to learn how to find joy at work, grab your coffee with some cream and let's get started. Hi, Teresa. Welcome to Coffee with Her.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So my first question for you is, what's your definition of happiness and what sparked your interest into pursuing a PhD in this topic?
Thank you. Well, I felt that I had been led astray by the misconceptions of where we believe happiness is found. So we think that it's found in our possessions, positions, titles, degrees, relationships, and experiences, and appearance, where research has now shown that even though people believe that their happiness is found in those things, that people are no more happier when they acquire them. So we say things like, I won't be happy until I pay off my mortgage. I won't be happy until I finish my degree. I won't be happy until I go on that vacation. I won't be happy until I find that perfect person. I won't be happy until I lose those 10 pounds. I won't be happy until in all of those things, as I mentioned. But again, research in positive psychology, where they basically studied what do happy people do that help them to be happier. We've discovered that none of those things actually lead to true happiness. And so basically, when you said, what is your definition of happiness? Happiness is actually a state of being. So again, we say things like, oh, happiness is a state of mind, that if you think, positive things and you look to the bright side and you try to be optimistic and hopeful, that, that's all you need to be happy. Well, happy as a state of mind is only part of your mental self. So happiness as a state of being recognizes that your spiritual self is already happy and happy in abundance. It's our mental, emotional, or physical self that may not be in alignment with the happiness that we are. And so when you know that your essential self, your original nature, is always happy and happy in abundance, but you're not feeling happy, it's because you're not in alignment with the part of yourself that is always happy. So emotionally, you may not be feeling happy because of things that happen every single day in the world that is constantly pulling us away from the happiness that we are. Yeah. That I wake up happy every morning, but the world pulls me away from that happiness because things are always happening outside of me that can misalign my mental, emotional, or physical self. So my steps is always about, what do we do to realign ourselves with the truth of who we are, which is always happy and happy in abundance.
I really like that. And I was just thinking, so would you say that, to make it more actionable, would you say that being grateful and being mindful are 2 ways to constantly realign yourself? Because if you're mindful, you're always in the present moment. And if you're grateful, you realize that everything's in service for you. And so therefore, you're always in alignment with yourself.
Yes, those are 2 great strategies to realign yourself. I would say that some of the strategies or steps would be maybe categorized as spiritual steps, let's say. Although oftentimes, we can't compartmentalize ourselves to say, that's why Mental Health Month in a sense kind of bothers me, because a lot of times for Mental Health Month they just talk about the mental part, but the mental part of us works in alignment with the emotional, spiritual, and physical self as well. So we can't just work on that part without also working on the other aspects, because everything is intertwined and interconnected. And so the practices that you just mentioned, gratitude and mindfulness, are two practices that could fall under your physical self. It could fall under your mental self. It could fall under your spiritual self. So those are really two great practices.
Okay, and you did mention a few of the limiting beliefs, such as, your jobs, titles, and all those kinds of things. So could you talk about them and how to break free of these limiting beliefs?
Well, I think we realize that when you reach a point in your life, so for me, many people that I tend to work with are those over 40 who have achieved all the things that family, society, culture, and religion tell us we need to have a happy life. And so if you watch my TED Talk that's entitled Does Money Buy Happiness, which I encourage everybody to listen to, it actually presents some very latest research around whether money buys happiness and my belief around that, but it actually updates some research that was done in 2010. So when you and I talked offline, that research in 2010 basically revealed at that time that if you had over 75,000. So it was really an average between 60 and 90. But that again was in 2010. So that average would be a little bit higher now just because of the cost of living has gone up. But they just averaged it at 75,000. And basically what they said to determine was that after 75,000, people were not any happier. So whether they had millions in their bank account, they weren't going to be any happier than those that were at 75,000. And so the research gets updated then, along with some other research that was done. And like I said, I invite you to check out my TED Talk to hear more about that.
Yeah, I
But
listened to that. It was amazing.
oh, good. Thank you. Thank you so much. So expectations are given to us by, as I said, well-meaning people like our family, friends, religious leaders, culture, society that tells us we need these things in order to be happy. But then you realize that you required them. So for you who you're still relatively young, you're listening to a lot of that programming and conditioning around what it is that you need in order to have a happy life. And so unfortunately, what happens is you reach maybe like the which I know this just from feedback that I've received, is that you reach the kind of like halfway midpoint of your life when you've accomplished a lot of these things. Your life checks off all the boxes. My life, for example, looked perfect on the outside. So how is it that I accomplished all the things and still felt unhappy and unfulfilled with my life? And it didn't matter how much more I bought, how much more I earned, how much more I achieved, where I went or what I did. This feeling of unhappiness and unfulfillment just couldn't be filled. And so that's when it really was the low point of my life. We won't go into that right now because I know we only have a limited amount of time together. But basically, it started me on a path of self-discovery where I started to work on myself. I started to discover more about my inner being instead of my outer being. So we're so conditioned to look outside of ourselves for all the answers, right? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think I should do? What do you think? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? Instead of going inward and discovering more about who we are on the inside. Like, who is your inner being versus the outer being, in the sense that your outer being is like your personality, your identity. But on the inside, your inner being knows why you came to have this human experience. So I believe we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So my inner being knows why I came here. What are the things that I came to do, to experience, to learn, to grow from, to evolve? And so when we go inward and we discover more of our inner being or our spiritual self, then we receive a lot of that guidance and that knowledge, but we also find the love, peace, and happiness that we're searching for, because it is always in there, and in there in abundance.
Right, I like that. And just tying this concept to the workplace and to careers, what are some common misconceptions about finding happiness at work and how can we rise above them?
So, some misconceptions about finding happiness at work is really about bringing your happiness with you. So, when you connect to the happiness that you are, that really stems from self love. So, love is the basis or foundation of all the good feeling emotions we have. So, when we connect to the love that we are, and we feel the love, peace, and happiness that we are, then we automatically radiate that into everything that we do. And so while workplaces might try to foster a good work environment, if people don't show up whole, healed, and complete, which we always are, but if we don't feel again the love that we are, the happiness that we are, and the peace, we can't show up at work as that person. And so it's so important that we are working on ourselves so that we can show up in our lives the way that we actually want to. So the work that I do in workplaces is really about how can people get right with themselves? How can they work on like their lives, even their personal lives, so that they don't carry that into the workplace? And so that the workplace doesn't become a toxic environment for people to come to because you have toxic people there, right? When they say, oh, my workplace is toxic. Yeah, it's toxic because people are coming to work toxic.
Yeah.
And that's why they radiate that type of energy out, right?
Yeah.
So like when you go into a room and you can feel the black cloud in the room, like you literally
Yes.
can feel those people that are negative and grumpy and they have just a bad energy. It's the same as that person who comes in that's full of life and it's just radiating that like positivity and joy. And those are the people we want to like hang out with. Those are the people that actually like they're like magnetic, that
Yes.
when you're with them they feel so good. And so if everybody at work took the time they needed to connect to the love, peace, and happiness that they are, and to know what steps work for them. That's the other thing, is that I talk about having a happiness toolkit. And your happiness toolkit, which again is what I speak to when I go into corporate settings, is, what are those things that you can turn to that immediately align yourself with the happiness that you are. So is that like cooking or being out in nature or exercising or reading or writing or painting or dancing or listening to music? Like it's endless the amount of things that we can use to help us to connect. So it's also important for people to realize that those things are not where their happiness is based in. Those things are a vehicle that help them to connect to a place inside of themselves that is always happy. Another analogy I can share with you is that happiness is like the electricity that is always flowing through all the walls. It just takes us to plug into that electricity to help us to feel it. So I ask people how much time do they spend connecting or plugging in to the happiness that's flowing through them all the time. And if you're working 60 to 80 hours a week and you get to the end of the week and you say, wow, my life sucks. Yeah, it does. Because how much time did you spend connecting to the happiness that's flowing through you all the time? And if you don't spend time using those things that are in your happiness toolkit, then of course you're not going to feel as happy as those that spend time connecting.
Yeah, I like that. And I like that you connected it to like the flow because I think that in order to feel happy, you have to be happy. And whatever you see in another person or like in the workplace or anything like that, it's just a projection of what you feel on the inside, you know? So if you always feel happiness, they're not actually the ones making you happy. You're making yourself happy and you can see that through them. They're
Yeah.
just a reflection of that happiness that you're projecting out.
Yes, that's right.
But here's an interesting study, actually. It might be a little bit contradicting. So, the World Happiness Report came out recently, and it showed that amongst some of the most unhappiest people in the world currently are Gen Zs in Canada and the US, specifically ranging from the ages of 15 and 24. And some of the factors that contribute to this are, of course, social media, because it leads to social isolation and so many other consequences. But a major contributing factor was actually the role that finance, or the lack of financial stability that our generation has, and just the lack of well-being that we see ourselves to have in the future. So given that you've spoken about, how money doesn't buy happiness in your TED Talk, how could we deal with these external pressures?
That's a really that's a really interesting question. I mean, I don't want to ruin the kind of the big idea that gets shared inside of the TED Talk. But I mean, happiness increases with more happiness. We don't actually need anything to be happy. We are
Right.
happy already. And so happiness, really, to say it is independent of how your finances are doing, really, but to say that we have five basic needs, and one of the basic needs that we have is safety and security. And so safety and security has to do with our health. It also has to do with us, having food and shelter and the things that we need. It is also important for us to differentiate between the things that we need and the things that we want.
Right.
Right? And we live, unfortunately, in Western society where there is a lot of marketing and consumerism around. There's a whole psychology about it too, right? About how to get people to desire things so they think they need them versus just what you want, right? And so I think we need to answer your question, I think we need to always be evaluating the things that we want and say, do we really need those things? That I think people want more than what's necessary. And again, when you realize that when you accumulate all of this stuff that money and finances can buy you, that you're not any happier when you had less. And so what I also know about getting older is that people start to realize that their health is the most important. That it's the actual intangible things, again, something I share in my talk, that it's the things that money can't buy that actually makes us the most happy. So the quality of our relationships is one of the things, one of the greatest predictors of our happiness. And that was revealed in a study that, like one of the longest studies of 75 years, that in the end determined that it was the quality of our relationships that bring us the most joy. But there's all these other great benefits from that. And so it is really the intangible things that lead us to be the most happy. And so I ask people to think about, is that something that you just want? And who told you that you need that, right? Because when we understand the psychology in the marketing of a lot of the things that they say that we need, is like, do you really need that house that's that big? Do you really need the big flashy, car? Do you really need? And that, again, once people acquire those things, they realize that they actually don't need all of those things to be happier, that they were fine with a smaller home. They were fine with just like, a regular car that gets them from A to B, that they really don't need the things that like all of these businesses and companies are telling you that you need them, because it lines their bottom, lines their wallet, and it increases their bottom line, but it doesn't actually increase our happiness and fulfillment with our lives.
Right, and I guess that really applies to our generation, because we're so roped up in social media, and this marketing is just always thrown at us.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next question. So you talk about aligning with the higher version of you. So what does that look like in a professional setting, and how can it lead to greater happiness?
Thank you. What a beautiful question. So our inner being is, I believe, created in the likeness of our Creator. The likeness of our Creator, whether you call it God or Source or the divine or consciousness, it doesn't matter. It actually doesn't care what you call it. It's just the belief in something greater than ourselves. The belief that that essential self, is infinite and eternal, that once we leave this earthly experience, that we don't just die, that we do continue to exist as energy. and that energy comes into this, like, some people call it a space suit, a human space suit, or this shell that you come into, and you are able to use this shell to do all the things that you want to do. That energetic part of ourselves is magnificent and powerful and extraordinary and very, very creative. It is curious. It is full of like positive energy. It feels invincible. It's where our superpowers reside. And so when we connect to that part of us, we feel like we can do anything. We feel like everything is possible. We feel like we can achieve our dreams and aspirations. We know that we are always completely supported in everything that we do, that the universe has our back, that there's like an invisible support system that is always working for us to support us in the things that we want to do and achieve. So it's important for us first to recognize the self-talk in our head and say, is that self-talk empowering? Is it telling us that we're invincible and incredible and magnificent, or is it telling us all of the negative things that we think
Yeah.
about ourselves?
Yeah, and I think even taking this concept to a professional setting, I'd say that if we consider ourselves invincible and, all these amazing things, it would actually lead to less conflict and less office politics and all sorts of things like that, because then you would be grounded in yourself, and you'd know that what's for you is for you, and like that coworker can't take it from you, or neither can the other one. So why would you bother going down to that level to like create so much conflict in the workplace?
Yes, beautiful. And when we know that the universe is abundant, there is enough for everybody. So we've been brought up again with some programming and conditioning that says to us it's all competition, right? That there's only so many of everything. But the universe is abundant, and everything that you are searching is also searching you. And so that's a quote by Rumi that says that which you are searching is also looking for you. And so that what is meant for you will find you. And so the opportunities that are meant for you because they're part of your life path will find you. Those things can actually be brought into your reality even quicker when you align with the energy of the things that you desire. Sometimes people talk about manifesting, but even the idea of how they talk about manifestation, which we could talk about that on a whole nother show, is actually incorrect in a lot of respects. But nevertheless, we don't have to feel like we have to be envious and jealous of our coworkers, because oftentimes when we are envious of things inside of other people, it's because we have those same traits within ourselves. We're just not recognizing them within ourselves. So when we see them in other people and we're envious of it, we don't need to be. It's because we have those same things. That's why we see them in someone else.
Yeah, I think envy in like a workplace setting is just telling you that, hey, this is something that I want as well, and I can have it without taking it away from another person.
Yes.
Because like if you think about it on a grander scale, you can say like, you know what, there's so many different types of flowers and trees and plants in this universe, but the sun shines on all of them no matter how big and small, so everybody gets their share of sunlight. So I think if you take that concept in the workplace, you could be a little bit less toxic and just happier in the workplace as well, and promote a happy environment.
Yes, yes. And know that you have what it takes within you to pursue the things that you want. And
Right.
so when we stay connected to that we are powerful creators creating our reality moment by moment, then we're less likely to be swayed by these other external things, whether it's people's negativity, whether it's even people's viewpoint on how they choose to live their life. That when we stay grounded and centered in our belief systems about ourselves, then the universe, because of the law of attraction, if anybody's heard that, you will attract the things that you're looking for when you align your energy to those things.
All right, folks, so that marks the end of part one of our In Pursuit of Happiness series with Teresa Greco. And as you go through your week, let's keep a few key takeaways in mind. So, number one, happiness is actually innate to all of us, and it's about realigning with that inner joy. Number two, external sources are simply reflections or paths to the happiness we already possess. And number 3, when you align with your higher self, especially in the workplace, you realize that what's meant for you can't really be taken away. And with that said, folks, I'll see you guys for part 2, where we talk about stressful scenarios in the workplace, which can influence our happiness and well-being.
This program is meant for entertainment purposes only. It is not meant to replace any educational programs or represent a professional coaching program. All examples provided by the author and speaker are purely anecdotal and are not meant to represent any institutions or companies in affiliation with the creator.